So David Goggins, man, I knew of David Goggins way back in the day before anyone knew his name because I read Jesse Itzler's book
Mhm.
Living with a Seal, right?
That
And that was
that's how
all
I
about,
found out too. Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, damn, how the fuck is this guy not like super well known? And I mean, this guy's a badass, like,
Yeah.
right? Well, the answer is that of course he's eventually gonna become well known, right? Like, I mean, he's
hmm
sold millions of copies of his book. I think at this point he's got another book coming out,
hmm
and he's super, super famous at this point. But all he did was just do his thing, right? He didn't even, I mean, he wrote his book, but he didn't go out and try to market himself. He didn't try to promote himself. Like, he just became such a badass that people noticed him, right?
hmm
And then they started writing about him and they started talking about him.
My name is Andrew Smitte.
All right, guys, welcome to the Success with Smitty podcast. I got a really exciting guest today. His name is John Sonmez. He's the founder of Bulldog Mindset and an author of 6 books and also an ultramarathon runner. John started as a software developer making around 6 figures, and after doing the math, he realized that you can't get rich just from working the regular job. So that's when he did some digging and realized that what he found was the commonality is getting rich. You have to do it through real estate. And so after investing in the real estate and taking some massive action, he actually ended up retiring at only 33 years old. So, John, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, appreciate the research you did on the intro too. Great job on that.
Thank you. Yeah, just tell us a little bit more about yourself or maybe anything I might have missed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm John Sonmez. I run Bulldog Mindset, also a company called Simple Programmer, and my main focus is really teaching people to have more freedom in life. I'm focused on teaching men how to develop the stoic mindset, get rid of the victim mindset, and to really build freedom in all areas of their lives. Right from the main place that we lack freedom, which is ourselves, right? Our ability to do what we actually want to do in our lives, right? Because we lack the discipline, we lack the knowledge of certain things, and then expanding all the way into financial freedom, teaching guys how to become financially free, retire young, and to be able to live the life that they want to. So I've been doing that for I mean, I think with Bulldog Mindset for the last 5 or 6 years, and yeah, that's basically what I do.
Awesome. And so you want to tell us kind of like what is the Bulldog mindset and like what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so Bulldog mindset really is the opposite of the victim mindset, right? So, the victim mindset says, hey, it's not my fault, it's society's fault, it's women's fault, right? It places blame on someone else or something else. Whereas the Bulldog mindset is all about taking personal responsibility, saying it doesn't matter if it's my fault or not, it's still my responsibility. So if I want something to happen in my life, I have to make it happen. Right. That's really what the Bulldog mindset is. It's really this idea of kind of the concept came from a bulldog, bulldog latches on and doesn't let go. And
Mm,
that's the idea of having that tenacity to just bite onto something and not let go. Right. Because, one of the most important things that's going to make you successful in life is commitment, is being totally committed to something. That's what it really takes to achieve success.
that's awesome. Yeah, just never giving up. I know that's super important. There's this program I got recently with Mike Tyson. He just released this course, and that was one of the things he said. If you want to be successful, you have to have that like commitment that no matter what, you just cannot give up.
Yeah.
So, um, so as far as like retiring early, is that something that you planned for, or like how did you plan for it, or like did you have a structure that you're like, okay, if I do this, this will allow me to retire at this age?
Yeah. So that was, I mean, it was kind of funny. It was actually the thing that I had really wanted to do more than anything else was I really just wanted to be able to be free so I could play video games. I just wanted to spend my time doing what I want to do. I want to play video games, do what I want to do during my time. And so from a young age, I wanted to really work hard and try to accomplish that goal. And so at first I thought, okay, making a lot of money would be the thing. So I got a really good job. I was making like ridiculous amount of money at the time. When I was 19, it was like, $75 an hour at that time, which, this is 20 years ago. So that was a lot. And then I realized that, when I did the math, that even if I saved $100,000 a year, it would take me over 10 years to become a millionaire, which isn't even rich. Isn't really, I mean, you could technically retire off of that, but if you factor in inflation, you factor in all these things, it's not enough, right? So I was like, well, how do you do this, right? And so that's where I started getting into doing some research, and I found that most of the people that were successful and were able to actually become wealthy, that they had done that through real estate investment. So then I came up with this plan. I said, all right, and I read this book by Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams, called Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And in that, he had some charts that were showing, okay, if you buy a property every year, this is how much it'll grow, and this is how much money you'll make over time. And I realized, oh, wow, this is it. If a very worst case scenario, if I buy one property every single year, then in 15 years, I could become financially free, because I could sell that first property and then keep that cycle going. And so I thought, okay, well, this is the plan. This is the way to do it. And so, I started down that path, and eventually I got there at 33. I hit the point where I think I was making $5,000 a month passive income, and that was enough to cover my expenses. So I was like, all right. So I went to Hawaii to go live on the beach and play video games. and I spent about 2 months there, and I was just miserable. I was not happy at all. I was depressed, probably the most depressed I'd been in my life. And the reason why was because I no longer had an objective, no longer had a goal to go afterwards. And, but yeah, it was definitely something that I had, and that was part of the problem, is that was the thing that I wanted more than anything. And sometimes when you get the thing that you want more than anything, then you don't have anything to live for, right? And so it's a dangerous thing. So even though it's good to become financially free, you have to go beyond that, right? And that's what I do now. Is right. A lot of people say, well, hey, if you're retired, why do you make videos, and why do you sell something on the internet? And my answer is because I still want to be doing it. I still want to be growing myself, and I don't have to work, which is great, but I want to continue building that, because when you're Tony Robbins says all the time, if you're not growing, you're dying, and that's the truth. So
definitely, I can totally relate to what you're saying with once you felt like you kind of hit your goal, then you kind of felt lost in a way. And because I was a collegiate swimmer, and my biggest goal in swimming was I want to be national champion for my division, and I was training my butt off for 5 years for it, and unfortunately I didn't hit it. I just say I ran out of time, because I was constantly improving, but I just didn't get as fast as I needed to in time. But once that college thing, my career was over, I jumped back in the water, and I was like, let me swim for, I don't know what I'm going to train for yet, but let me just start swimming and just staying in shape. And I jumped in the water the first time, and it just felt really weird. I was like, why am I even here? I was like, maybe it's just, maybe I just need a little break or something. I don't know. It's been a lot of training, so maybe I just need I'll give it another day. Let me just try one more day. So next day I come in, jump back in the water, and I just felt even worse, and I just felt even more lost. And I was like, what is going on? And so then the third day, I was like, I jumped in the water, and I didn't even finish the practice. I just got out of the practice. I was just training by myself, but I was like, this just doesn't feel right. I can't be doing this. And I just felt so lost, because I didn't have any kind of purpose or anything that I was training for,
Right.
So yeah, now I'm still trying to figure out if I want to continue swimming or not, but that was really relatable. I totally got what you were saying there.
Yeah. It's what I learned from it is that you have to, most people set goals in order to get something, right? Because I want to get this. You have to change your view around goals to, I want to become this. Right. You do something because you want to become it, rather than to get something from it. Because, you can, I set goals now based on who I want to become, right? On what do I
really
want
cool.
to, because you can get $1 million, and that's fine. And you might think that that's going to make you happy, but it's not going to be. It's who you become in the process. And that's something that you can always strive for, right? Because, I run ultramarathons and run marathons and different, and I'm 230 pounds, 6'3". I'm not a runner, like a typical endurance runner, right? So I'm not going to win any marathons. It's not going to happen. It's not in the cards. There's just, it doesn't matter how hard I train. There's no way. Like I maybe if I drop 40 or 50 pounds, it might be a option, but it's just not going to happen. But why do I do it? I'm doing it because not to win, but because it's causing me to grow, right? I'm growing in a specific direction. So I have a goal. I did just recently, I did a half marathon. I hit my goal. I wanted to do a 1:45 half marathon, and I broke that. And again, for some people that's not even a fast time, right? For me, it was a fast time, but it was about, like, if I can go after that, then it's going to force me to grow in that direction. And that's what I'm after. So I'll set another goal. I'm going to probably do a 100K race here, and I'm going to try and, have a specific time on that, or compete with myself on that, because I know that doing that is going to make me grow in a different direction. So.
That's cool, man. I like the idea of like setting your goals to be not like money, like a certain like number, or like a time for me in swimming or something like that. It's like, who can I become? Like that's why I want to achieve this goal, is because I want to become a certain person or become better. Yeah. I think that's awesome.
And actually, I had a coaching client. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I had a coaching client of mine that recently signed up with me, and he's got a fairly big YouTube channel. He's doing about $1 million a year or so. And when he signed up, he was having trouble in life. He was like, man, I don't have motivation anymore. I don't want to do anything. Even though I'm making all this money, it's like, I don't even want to like I have all this work I should do, but I don't even want to do it. And, and so I was like, okay, you're going to run a marathon. And he's like, I don't even run. What are you talking about? I'm going to run a marathon. Should I do like a 5K race or something like that? I was like, no, you're signed up for, we're going to train you for a marathon. Right. And man, we got him on, signed him up the next day for this marathon. He's never run before in his life. And he started training for this thing, and everything changed, right? Because it was like, in order for him to become the person who could run a marathon, he had to grow and change in so many ways. And it changed his whole life. He started making more money in business. He started being more excited about life. One of the guys on his team also ended up running a marathon, and it impacted his life and changed his life. And it's like, because we set that goal, the goal was, who cares if you run a marathon? What does it even matter? It's not going to, you're not going to make a bunch of money. But it's because it required him to go so far beyond what he was, to be able to, dig deep and be able to do this, incredible feat, that it changed who he was. It made him grow. And that's the thing, is because what he was doing right then wasn't growing. So that's what the real thing is like, pick something, like even for you, like if the swimming, if you want to, pick some goal out there in order to grow you in some direction. Or maybe you pick something else. Maybe you do a marathon, or you do an ultra marathon or something like that, that's going to make you grow in some direction, and that can change your entire life.
Yeah, I definitely want to do a marathon. I've only done a half marathon. It was just like a random spontaneous thing. I just started out running 3 miles, and it turned into 5 and all the way until I got to the half marathon mark. But I've never done like an official race or anything like that. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying with like, you need to. So this is something I learned from Mike Tyson, actually, is he talks about, if you want to you have to be the champ before you can become the champ, is how he phrases it.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be that person before you actually end up being that person. And that's something I really tried to live by when I was training to be a national champion in swimming, because I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure first one at the pool every day, first one in the water every day, doing my stretches, like before bed, like before every practice, cooling down properly, like every single thing. I was just training like I was already that person. And man, yeah, it really did help me develop overall, just like being a better human and a better version of myself. So
exactly. Yeah, I was talking about the idea of act as if you're already who you want to be. Act as if you've already done this 1,000 times. Act as if you could never fail. Act as if, you just act as if, right? And if you start acting that way, you become the thing.
Definitely. So if you can't tell already, I'm a big Mike Tyson fan. And I was listening to something else, and he said this, and I was curious on what your take is. He says, prioritize reaching goals and glory over money. And it kind of sounds like you have a similar philosophy based off what we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I forget it. There was this what's that show on House of Cards, right? There's this scene with Kevin Spacey's character where he says something along the lines of, you know, they made the single biggest mistake, went for the McMansion instead of power, right? And it's like the idea is that, you know, if you prioritize, like Mike Tyson saying, your goals and achieving, like becoming great, becoming excellent at something, you will get money. The money will come, because that's an automatic, right? It's like one of the guys that I coached, that he's got a really successful YouTube channel, and he's got like 500 600,000 subscribers on YouTube. Like, he is so meticulous about creating these great videos, and of course he's going to be able to make money. I mean, you know, he didn't know anything about making money from his videos before I started working with him and coaching him, but because he had created these awesome videos, it was so easy to get him to 100K a month, because he already had focused on that. And now, if we had just focused, there's a lot of guys that come to me and that want to do coaching, and they're like, I want to make money. And it's so much harder to get those guys to make money, right? Because if your focus is trying to make money, you don't have anything to go off of. But if you focus on the art, if you focus on the becoming good, just producing good result, doing the right thing, the money will come on after that automatically, because that the harder thing to do is to develop the skill. So I agree 100% with that.
That reminds me of a conversation I had. It was probably about a month ago. It was actually with another guy that Greg had introduced me with, and I was talking to him about like my goals for my podcast, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I want to be like make $1 million by the time I'm 30 and all this kind of stuff. And he said this quote, I believe it was by Albert Einstein. He said it was like something along the lines of, instead of trying to or focus on becoming a man of value versus like a successful man, or something like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I took that to heart a lot, and now I've been trying to figure out like what can I do to increase like my value to the world, because I know like the more value I provide, obviously the money is going to come as a byproduct, like the more value I provide in some way. So yeah, that was kind of like a big mindset shift for me.
It's a good example of this, I think, is are you familiar with David Goggins?
Oh yeah, I love him.
Yeah. So David Goggins, man, I knew of David Goggins way back in the day before anyone knew his name, because I read Jesse Itzler's book, Living with a Seal, right? And that was all about. I found
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, damn, how the fuck is this guy not like super well known? And, you know, I mean, this guy's a badass, like, right? Well, the answer is that, of course, he's eventually going to become well known, right? Like, I mean, he's sold millions of copies of his book. I think at this point, he's got another book coming out, and, you know, he's super, super famous at this point. But all he did was just do his thing, right? He didn't even, I mean, he wrote his book, but he didn't go out and try to market himself. He didn't try to promote himself. Like, he just became such a badass that people noticed him, right? And then they started writing about him, and they started talking about him. And that's like, so many of us were trying to market ourselves, which, again, it's not a bad idea to market yourself, but it's so much of a better idea to do what David Goggins did and just become really, 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 really good at something, or have, become the best, the hardest, he became the hardest, man in the world, or, basically the toughest guy. And then the success follows if you do that.
Yeah, that's really a really cool philosophy. Like how David Goggins, I feel like he actually didn't even want to be like well known based off like what I know about him, and then it just kind of happened just because of the person he became. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and it's inevitable. That's the thing, is that if you become that kind of person, it is inevitable.
So this is kind of like a follow-up question, I guess, kind of off of what we've been talking about. But so like, I'm sure you've obviously heard the law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, how do you so law of attraction, obviously what you focus on constantly, and like you attract basically. And so there's also something called like the law of repulsion. Are you familiar with that? So I guess, how do you obsess over something and like attract it and not seem like become needy about it and repel that away? Like, how do you obsess without being needy?
Yeah. So, okay. So I think it comes down to just the difference between being needy and not, right? So I talk to a lot of guys about this in terms of dating, right? Of dating coaching and whatnot. And it's sort of like this. It's like, because a lot of guys will say, oh, well, you should just, there's this kind of crazy idea that it's called, what do they call it? They call it, choosing signals, where like, don't go and talk to a girl, wait to see which girls are giving you choosing signals, right? Because if you go and talk to a girl, that's needy, because you're trying to get something from her. You're chasing her, you're pursuing her, right? And so the idea of choosing signals is that you just wait and then see which ones are giving you signs that they're interested in you, right? Now that's wrong. Okay. The reason why it's wrong is because it's not needy to, let's imagine that someone dropped $100 bill on the ground, right? Okay. And you went and you saw them drop the $100 bill, and you go and you pick up this $100 bill. And you're like, hey, excuse me, you dropped this $100 bill, right? At that point, even if they reject you, if they're like, what are you talking about? Get away from me. Like, we're like, that's not my $100 bill. You'd be like, okay, like all right, well, you wouldn't be personally insulted, right? Because you're not coming from a needy place, right? But if you went up to someone and you said, hey, could I have $100? Then it's needy, right? Because you're trying to take something. One is giving and one is taking, right? And so it's that same kind of psychology, right? You could go and you could talk to a girl, let's say, and you could come across as needy, because you're trying to take something, you're trying to get approval, you're trying to get validation, you're trying to get acceptance from anyone. It doesn't have to be a girl, it could be anyone, a celebrity that you meet, and you act really needy, right? You act very because you're trying to get something, you're trying to get their approval, get them to like you, get a positive response from them, right? But you could also talk to a girl, and you could open a conversation and not be needy at all, because you're giving value, because you're like, hey, it's a benefit to talk to me, like I'm giving you value, like I'm here, like you're viewing it as you giving, as opposed to you're not trying, and you don't even care, like you don't even care. It's just like, you see a beautiful girl, I tell guys all the time, just go talk to her, and just but don't have any expectation, just don't care. Like if she isn't interested, it doesn't matter, because you're just want to go and talk to her, because you're just sharing the love, like that's it, right? You don't have any kind of agenda or kind of goal. I mean, sure, yeah, maybe you want to get her phone number, but it doesn't matter. Like you're okay with whatever outcome comes, right? And so again, if we take this exact same mentality and we apply it to the question that you just asked, it's the same thing. Like, you can obsess about something, right? You can, law of attraction, like you can work towards something, but you have to be independent of the outcome. You have to say, yeah, I really like, this is awesome. I'm gonna focus on this thing. This is the thing that I envision, right? But can you come at it from a non-needy approach, where you're saying, well, I'm just gonna do it because I want to do this. I want to focus on this thing, but I don't need the result to come, right? It seems almost counterintuitive to be able to do that, but that's the key, is because if you're needy, if you're coming across as this must happen, or I'm depending on this thing, or please let this happen, God, then you're going to repel it. That's when you're bringing that needy behavior to it. So it's just that same mentality. The easiest way I can say is that you have to view it as someone just dropped $100 bill and you're trying to give them the $100 bill, right? That's the mindset you have to have, as opposed to you're trying to take $100 bill. So if you're asking the universe, saying, I want this thing, right? Then that's the taking. But if you're saying, if you're trying through law of attraction to attract something by saying, all right, I love this thing so much that I'm just excited about this thing, I give my energy to this thing, then you're not repelling. You're not being in a needy, you're not coming from a needy frame, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I can't remember who said this, but one of my buddies was telling me, or he shared this story with me about this guy. His idea is like, when you write down, or he did this experiment, he said, okay, guys, I want you to write down, like, I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. And he wrote it. He had everyone just like obsessing about not climbing a ladder. And then I guess somehow by doing like the opposite. You would think like, okay, obviously I'm not going to climb a ladder. And he's like, do whatever you can in your power to not climb this ladder. And then next thing you know, a lot of these guys end up climbing ladders, and then they realize it when it's too late, and they're like, what the heck? Like I had one job, but it was almost like the reverse effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when you focus on something too much, especially to try and avoid something, right? It's really like, I think, what the really thing that connects the dots here is acceptance, right? It's just this idea of whatever is great, right? I just accept whatever is, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have any kind of, inclinations towards how you wish things would happen. It doesn't mean you don't have ambition or have drive in a direction that you want to go. But if you drive a certain direction, but you go somewhere else, then you have to be okay with it. And that's the key is that, when you look at that ladder example, it's like, if you try to avoid something, right, what you resist persists, then you're going to drive yourself into that, right? It's like the self-fulfilling prophecies, or that type of thing. But if you're like, all right, well, it doesn't matter, whatever happens, then you're not going to create that kind of situation.
So do you think it would work the same way if I was like, okay, I don't want to get rich, I'm gonna do everything I can not to get rich? And then do you think as a result, like it could happen like the opposite way, in a good way?
I think if you truly, truly believe that, right? If you truly were like, I don't want to get rich, I just want to do my thing, but you can't trick yourself into truly, truly wanting that.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
But what you can do is you can say, look, all right, what I want to do is I want to just do the best at what I'm doing. Like, bring my best every time, right? Because it's not as much what you do, it's how you do it that matters, right? And so if you're like, I'm going to bring my best, how I'm going to, like, that's what I want to do, is I want to just do the best that I can. And then whatever outcome comes, it doesn't matter. In fact, here, I'll give you an analogy from swimming, right? Have you ever seen that meme with
Michael
Michael
and Chad the
Phelps?
Clo?
Yeah, where he's looking over, where it's like winners focus on their goals and losers focus on the winners.
Yeah.
Right. So what is Michael Phelps doing? He's focusing on, he doesn't care where he's just focused on swimming his best swim, right? Not on where, if he's ahead or anything, or like he's just like, I'm just going to get there as fast as I can. I'm just focused on that thing. And then at the end, he'll look up and see if he's won or not. Right. It's like, but the other guy is focusing on, am I beating, am I winning? And that's the thing, is it's like, so if you're just like, okay, I'm just focused on, like, if you're doing a podcast, all right, I'm just focused on making the best podcast that I can. And then at some point you'll look up and you'll have $1 million, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the way that you're going to have a lot more success, rather than like, oh, am I making money from this? How am I, not to say that you're not going to like think about what things you should do to make money, but that can't be the focus. The focus has to be on, I'm just executing as best as possible. And another place I learned this was from poker, right? I used to play a lot of poker. I just went the other day and played with my dad a little bit. And the biggest lesson that you'll learn in poker, in fact, there's a really good book by a professional poker player, Annie Duke. She wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. It really talks about this philosophy. But what you learn in poker is that you can make the right moves, right? Play perfectly well and lose, and you can play horribly bad and win, because there's an aspect of luck to it in the short term. In the long term, the person who plays more skillfully wins, right? But in the short term, because there's a luck element, and it can go either way. And so you have to kind of learn that your job as a poker player, right, is to control your emotions and just to focus on making the right moves over and over again. And you don't worry about the outcome, because, hey, sometimes you're going to lose a bunch of money, even though you did the right thing, but it doesn't matter, because in the long term, you're going to win. And it's the same thing with business and life, is you have to realize that there's small fluctuations in luck. But if you continue to focus on doing the right thing and doing the best, focus on just taking right action, then eventually you'll come out on top. And even if you don't, it's not up to you, right? The best you can do is the best you can do, and that's it. There is going to always be a part of luck involved in life, and you cannot eliminate that. In certain things, there's going to be more, like there is more in poker for sure. But all you can do is take the best action that you can. And if you're doing that, then that's all. There's in the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian, Hindu religious text. There's a part in there where he says that you are entitled to your labor, but not the fruits of your labor, which is so critical. So it's basically saying like your job is to do the work. You don't deserve anything for doing the work, right? The results come or they don't. Like you just focus on doing your work, and you don't have control over the results, because what you have control over is the actual work on bringing your best. And then if you bring your best, you have the greatest chance of getting the results that you want, but it still doesn't guarantee it. So you just focus on the one thing that you can focus on.
That actually reminds me of another Michael Phelps story. There's a story where I forget, I think it was the 200-meter butterfly at one of the Olympic Games. And like, obviously they say, take your mark, go. And then so he jumps in the water and his goggles completely fill up with water. And like the first 25, and he can't even see like where he's going, but he knows so well his race plan. So like, obviously he's not thinking about his time. He's just like, okay, let me think about what is my race plan? How many kicks do I do off the start, off the turns? How many strokes does it take for me to get to to each wall, for each like different 50, because obviously you're going to get tired by the end of it. So you might take more strokes and be less efficient. And so he knew all of his numbers and his exact race plan. And anyway, he finishes the race, like finally touches the wall, takes off his goggles so he can actually see it, and like looks at the wall and he sees he broke the world record and got a gold medal.
Wow.
Like, it's crazy. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a perfect example, right? That's the thing, is like, sometimes it's better to fly blind, right? Like if you can't see there, if you're just focused on executing the plan, and that's what trips up more entrepreneurs than anything else. This is why most people quit, why most people fail at being an entrepreneur, is because they can see too clearly. They need water in their goggles, right? Because if you were just like, I just need to execute the damn plan, then you would get there. But because they can see that they're not getting there as fast as they want to, they give up. Whereas if they, there's this book, I think it came from Think and Grow Rich, but there's a book called 3 Feet from Gold, or this idea of like it's about the story about this guy that was digging. He bought this mine and he started digging for gold, and he spent all this time and effort, and then he gave up, right? And he sold it off, and he was just frustrated. And then the next person who bought the mine, they dug from the tunnel that he had spent digging, and he was literally 3 feet from a huge gold vein. If he would have just kept going just 3 feet away after digging hundreds and hundreds of feet, he would have made it. So but yeah, that's the thing, is sometimes it's better if we have our goggles on and we can't see.
That was a really interesting analogy. I like that a lot. That was really interesting. So I want to shift topics a little bit. I want to talk about confidence. So you come across as a guy, I know I told you this a little bit before the podcast, but you come across as a guy who's extremely confident. And I guess, like, how have you built and developed your confidence over the years? And I'm guessing you were always as confident as you are now, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not as confident as I am now. There's a few different things. I mean, my definition of confidence is knowing the possible outcomes of a situation and knowing that no matter what happens, you'll be okay, right? And confidence is contextual, meaning that you have confidence in certain situations, right? But you can have an overall life confidence, which comes from having confidence in a lot of different areas. If you apply it to life, right, you could say that what the possible outcomes are, and that no matter what happens, you'll be okay. So how can you know these things? Through repetition, by doing something over and over again and surviving. You're going to be okay, right? So, for example, guys are always asking me, how do I become more confident with women? Well, hey, if you go up and you talk to 1,000 women, it doesn't matter even if they reject you, because now you know the possible outcomes, right? So if you know what could happen, most of our fear, right, or insecurity comes from not knowing what could happen. But if hey, I'm probably going to get rejected 9 out of 10 times. Okay, cool, fine. Now you know what's going to happen, and you're going to be okay. So it doesn't matter. So now you can do that action. Because if you think about what makes us not confident, it's because we fear the outcomes because they're unknown. We fear unknowns. That's most of what we fear. We don't fear things that are known, right? We really fear the unknown. And then we don't know what's going to happen to us. Are we going to be okay or not from this thing? And it's kind of hardwired into our psychology. So so that's what I've tried to do, is try to expose myself to as much stuff as possible, right? So you think about it as you have this circle of comfort, right? And my whole thing is to move myself outside of my comfort zone, right? Because when I first got on stage and started talking, I mean, I remember the first talk I ever gave on stage, I was just like sweating. My armpits were just soaked, right? Staining through my shirt. I was stuttering. I couldn't talk. I was nervous as hell. But I was like, if I do this 10 times, the 10th time I'm going to be less nervous. It's like it has. So it's just repetitions, right? So I just have to do that many times. And so I forced myself to do things that made me uncomfortable. I went out there and I spoke on stages. I went out there and I approached hundreds of, probably thousands of girls and talked to them. Sometimes I said stupid stuff, just silly stuff, sometimes I would just go up and not say anything and just stand there just to make it uncomfortable. Or sometimes I'd cut mid conversation and just with a stupid look on my face just to make myself even more uncomfortable, right? I got on YouTube, I made podcasts, I did all these different things that made me feel uncomfortable so I could expand my comfort circle. Because the wider your comfort circle is, the more confident you'll be. And if you think about this, there's certain domains, I'm sure, for example, even though maybe in one-to-one conversations or certain situations you might feel like you're a little bit nervous and not as confident, I guarantee you when you get into that pool, you have confidence, right? Because you've done it so many times, right? And if you were to talk to someone, if you were to teach a beginning swim class, right, with people who had never really swam or never swam competitively, you'd probably be able to get up there confidently, like, this is what you need to do. You need to change your kick like this, right? You'd be able to command that entire room, right? Because you're comfortable. It's within your circle of comfort, right? But now if you were to get up on stage and talk about how to be an entrepreneur, you might be nervous, you might be shaking in your boot because it's not within your circle of comfort. Maybe not, maybe it is, but you see what I'm saying? So the whole idea is you have to expand that circle by going outside of your comfort zone. In fact, a lot of the guys that I help with dating coaching, I tell them, I'm like, your goal is not to get a phone number. It's not to get a positive result. It's just to go up there, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and stay there. Then you win. I'll give you a high five if you just go up and do it. Like, don't worry about the outcome, because I know that if you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, remain in that uncomfortable situation, you're going to grow. And I know if you keep on growing, what's going to happen? You're going to get results. And so the focus has to be on growth, which means putting yourself in uncomfortable situations over and over again.
So, do you think even if it's like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that aren't even related to, I guess, like your final outcome, do you think it still plays a role into it?
That gives you overall life confidence, right? Because one of the reasons why I'm able to be confident in a lot of different situations is because I've been in a lot of situations, right? And I know it doesn't matter. Like, nothing's going to phase me that much. I've already gone through the discomfort. And so, so if you do a lot of different things, you're going to be like, okay, well, this is a new thing. Like, I remember when I did this thing for the first time and I was scared. And so, but I did that and I'm okay. And I did this thing and I did that thing. So yeah, I can do this thing too.
What about, like, I guess, I'm sure maybe you're even one of these people, like when you walk into a room and like everyone just kind of looks in that direction, they can just feel that person's energy. Like if it was like Andrew Tate or something, like walking into the room, everyone's going to notice him right away. Even if they don't see him, they're probably going to feel his presence in some way. Like, I guess, how do you become that kind of guy?
It's really just on, it's not on who people think you are. It's who you think you are. That's the key, right? Who do you know you are, right? When I walk into a room, I know that I've run 50 miles. I know what my workout is. I know that how hard I've worked, that on writing books and doing things that I've done, and the experiences in life that I've had, and that I've fasted for days and gone without food and done these crazy kind of things. So I know who I am. And so when I walk into the room, I bring that with me, right? So now if I'm concerned about, do these people care about who I am, or what do they think about me, then I'm going to bring a nervous energy into the room, and an insecurity and neediness. But when I come into the room and I'm like, I know who I am, right? I show up, it's automatically going to attract other people. Automatically people are going to notice, right? Too many of us focus on how other people are perceiving us, right? There's a difference between being self-conscious and self-aware, right? Self-conscious is that voice in your head that's like, oh, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you said that. That was so stupid. Like, why did you do that? Or you look like a dork right now. Why are you just standing there with your hands in your pocket? Everyone's looking at you. Like all this self-talk, right? Self-aware is like, hey, okay, I just said something dumb. I don't care. Like it's like this, like it doesn't matter. Like it's just observing the things. It's just okay, all right, whatever. This has just happened. I'm just aware of what happened, right? It's more of I'm focusing on the other people rather than focusing on myself. Right? When we turn our focus internal, we judge ourselves, and we're going to be nervous, and we're going to be scared, and we're going to not exhibit that presence that you're talking about. When we turn our focus to other people, like on making them feel comfortable, on what's going on with them, then we become more self-aware. We're aware of how we are how we are projecting in the space versus how we feel in the space, right? Don't worry about how we feel, worry about how other people feel. That will change the whole dynamic.
So kind of going off of that, like as far as not as much caring about, like basically just like not as much worrying about like what other people think about you, and just like knowing who you are. So like I guess kind of my goal for this podcast eventually is to create a coaching program. Like I want to be kind of like a mindset / life coach, and help people hit their goals in whatever area of life it is that they want to hit it in, through like mindset training basically. And I was talking to, it's mostly people in my family, but I guess their ideas, like, why would someone want to listen to a 23-year-old who maybe hasn't had that much life experience compared to someone who's like my age, who's like 40, 50 years old? Like, why would someone want to listen to you? And I guess in my head, I'm like, in my opinion, and this is what I truly believe, is I mean, I don't know any 23-year-olds who have, I guess, like done the crazy stuff, like mentally, like push himself mentally and physically as much as I have. And not even just in swimming. Like I've done some pretty like insane fitness challenges as well, outside of swimming. And I don't know, I guess just like, how can I overcome that obstacle of just thinking like why would people listen to me if I'm only 23, or like take my life advice when maybe they're even older than me?
Yeah. So, I mean, I struggle with the same thing, because I've been doing this for a long time, even before I started in this capacity, right? I'm 42 now. I was, first started creating videos like when I was 28 or 27, right? And even before then, I was acting as a mentor in my job and whatnot, and writing blog posts and things like that. But here's the thing about it is there's a few things, or a few things. So first of all, you don't need permission. You can just do whatever the fuck you want, right? So when I first started creating videos on YouTube, I would share them on Facebook, and my friends and family would message me like, what are you doing? You're embarrassing me. Like, why are you trying to give life advice? Or you're just a software developer. Like, why are you telling people how to live their life? Or like, why would they listen to you? And you're not a psychologist. You're not, whatever. And I just ignored them because I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So you could do what you want to do, but I'm going to do what I want to do, and it doesn't matter. Like that's the very first thing you just have to have in your head is like, you don't need to get permission. You don't need permission. You can do whatever you literally want to do. You don't need permission to do it. It's now, will you be successful at it? Maybe not. Who cares? It's your fucking problem. It's not their problem. I mean, right. That's what you really got to have in your head is like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I'm going to do what I want to do. Right. The second thing about this that I would say that is important is that you've done it yourself, right? Which you kind of talked about is like, if you want to be a mindset coach, you have to, your biggest thing is to work on yourself, right? To become the best that you can. I've got a friend of mine that's a hypnotist, and he does personal development stuff. And he's like, I think he's like 23 or 24 or so. And, he just fucking works his craft, like just really, really hard. And so even though he's very young, he's giving life advice. People are paying him a lot of money, but because he's just so good at what he's doing, right? So if you have worked on yourself, if you've done, just like I said with David Goggins, right? David Goggins didn't go out there and be like, oh, I want to teach people how to be mentally tough. He said, I'm going to be mentally fucking tough, right? He would just focus on himself. And so if you just focus on making yourself mentally tough or developing yourself in the same way that you want to train other people, then naturally those people are going to gravitate towards you, especially if you're documenting your journey, and they're going to want to coach you. I didn't have to go out and look for coaching clients. People came to me and they said, I want to get the Bulldog mindset. How do I do this? Help me do this. Right. So, and then the third thing is focusing on a niche, right? Don't just be a mindset coach, be a specific, right? You can eventually be more broad, but what's the specific thing that you're going to teach? I mean, heck, what if you're a mindset coach for swimmers specifically, right? That would be something that you have an expert domain in, and you have this very specific, and you can make videos and content that was like, this is for you guys. No, it doesn't have to be this. I'm just throwing this out there, but have something specific, right? If I was going to teach someone, my mindset, maybe you teach people how to get over social anxiety. Maybe, you need to have one specific outcome, one thing that you're really, really the best in the world expert at, or you could be the best in the world expert at. And that's going to help you to grow really fast. And it's also going to eliminate the disadvantage you have of being young, right? Because if you think about it, right, if someone is, let's say someone is a lawyer, right? And they're 20 years old and they're a general kind of all-purpose like lawyer, you'd be like, oh, what could a lawyer that's 20 years old really know, right? But if you had someone who's 20 years old who's a lawyer, but they're a lawyer on a very specific thing, like they're the best expert in, whatever it is, let's say, international patent law for kitchen devices. Okay. Let's then you're like, it doesn't matter if they're 20 years old. This is the expert in this thing. So does that make sense? Like the more specialized you are, the less people care about how old you are.
Okay. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. That's a really good idea. I'm glad you mentioned that. So thanks for that recommendation. So I guess this is kind of talking about your ultra marathon a little bit. I guess, what did you learn when you ran your first 100-mile race? Like, who did you become? I guess, what are some of the things that your biggest takeaways from it, and like your mindset throughout the race?
So I haven't run 100 yet. I ran a 50.
Oh, it was a 50. Okay.
50 mile. Yeah. But I mean, I think you really do figure out who you are when you're anything past 30 miles. I feel like, to me, you figure out who you are. What I learned about, one of the biggest things I learned was that no matter what, you can keep on going, even when you think that you're well beyond your limit. Because I can tell you, once I was 30 miles into that, I did feel like I was well beyond my limit. Like, it was hard to get from 25 to 30 and 20 more miles to go. It feels impossible, but you can always go one more. You can always go one more mile. You can always go one more step, right? There's, so I think that was the thing about it. I'm trying to think what else I really learned from it. I mean, my fastest mile was my last mile. So
champions finished strong.
Yeah. So that the thing is that it's not about like you have more than, I guess it's kind of the same thing as like you have more than you think that you have, right? A lot of it is just so much of life, so much of everything is mindset. That is so much of the thing. And it is not just the physical, but and even just from running in general, right? I had quit running after that for like almost 2 years, and then I lost all my endurance, right? But then one day when I started running again, I was just immediately ran 10 miles. Now, the first time I ever ran 10 miles, it took me 3 months to train up to be able to run that distance. But why could I just run 10 miles? Well, even though I was in worse shape, because I knew it, because mindset had shifted, because I had the belief, right? Even though physically I wasn't any more equipped to do it. Mentally, I knew that it was possible.
That reminds me of another Mike Tyson quote that I heard recently is he says, belief applied properly will supersede a genius.
Yeah.
And something along those lines. And it basically just like the key to, like, you can't be successful in anything or accomplish anything if you don't believe in yourself. You have to have unwavering belief, basically. And so, like, and I know that's, I guess, another area where confidence comes from, is just you truly believe in yourself that, like, no matter what, like, you're going to do whatever you say you're going to do, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of, I guess, the last actually, sorry, I just have another question that I'm curious about. Where did you come up with a lot of your philosophies, like, about life? Because I resonate with, like, a lot of the philosophies that we've talked about and that I've heard through, like, your social medias and stuff. Where did those, like, a lot of those philosophies come from?
Yeah, from two sources. One primarily, one of them is reading a lot of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I absorb a lot of content. I read maybe 60, 70 books a year.
Oh, wow.
And when I'm running, I'm listening to audiobooks, like 2,
Mm-hmm.
3x speed. I get through a lot of content.
Mm-hmm.
I read the Stoic philosophy, things like that. But then the main way where these have come from is that's sort of the raw materials which I used in order to create the actual product, which comes from thinking, sitting and thinking, just thinking it through, right? Most of the life philosophies I come up with have just from me sitting and just thinking it through. And it's something that so few people do today, right? Most of us, we're so addicted to our phones, to social media, to what other people tell us, which, again, some of those things are good, some aren't, is that we don't ever think for ourselves, right? We're just, if you look at the political divides that we have in the country, and just the kind of craziness that we have, it's from people not thinking for themselves, right? Most people belong to some team. They belong to some philosophy, some political ideology, some religion. They haven't actually just sat and thought about their own philosophy. In fact, Seneca talked about this a lot. He would basically rail against other philosophers or people who studied philosophy. He said, all you do is just read books. You just read what other people wrote, but you don't, when are you going to develop your own life philosophy? It doesn't matter if you can quote the poets, but where's your poetry? What have you done? Right. And so I just sit a lot of times and I just think things through. I just think about, how should this work, or what makes sense to me? And I come up with a lot of different things like that. With confidence, for example, that was something that I just sat there and I thought about it for a long time. I was like, well, how do you develop confidence? What makes me confident? Like, what have I done? How did I develop and that's where I came up with those frameworks, and then I test them and see, and revise it over time. But one of the most powerful things that you can do is just sit there with your own thoughts and just think through. You could figure out most things in life. You already have enough material to do it. You just need to just sit and think. That's it.
So do you set out time every day, or like maybe like a certain day of the week, or for like a designated time period? Like, okay, for this time, I'm just going to sit here and just think. I just let my mind go and just be aware of my thoughts for like this hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is.
I don't do it like on a set schedule. I'm sort of in a habit of doing it just throughout the day, a lot of different times. When I'm going for a run, sometimes I won't listen to anything, and I'll just be there with my thoughts. Some of it just comes from producing, right? So if I have to make a video on a topic, right, then I have to come up with an answer for something, right? So I have to think about it right on the spot there. Heck, even just doing interviews like this, some of the best content, some of the best philosophies I've come up with have been spontaneously on interviews, where it's forced me to take something that was in my head and to convey it. When you teach something to someone else, that's when you truly you take your knowledge to understanding, into wisdom, right? And so a lot of times writing blog posts, creating videos, that's why I always talk about the 70-30 rule, which is that you should produce 70% and consume 30%. Because if you're doing that, then you're going to be, that forces you to think.
Yeah, that's true. That's really interesting. So, my last question. So, like, obviously, I was telling you that I'd seen that you connected with Andrew Tate. Like, I've watched one of your podcasts and stuff like that. And I get, how are you able to connect with someone who's like super high status, like a really high level person? And how can other people connect with super high level people like that?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've I've interviewed a lot of people like, Andrew Tate and um Alex Hermosi and
Oh wow.
Kevin Sorbo and
Mhm.
guys like that um and a lot of times when I did that, it was because I spotted them before they got big,
Hmm.
right? Because I wasn't really paying attention to how much clout does someone have or how big are they. I was looking at, you know it- who resonates with me, right? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because and then those people eventually blew up, right? So when I first talked
Mhm.
to Andrew Tate, if you go back and you look at my interview with Andrew Tate, is before anyone really even knew who he was, right? um, and then eventually he blew up, right? Fresh and Fit, right? The guys there, Myron, right? I helped them get started because I saw what they were doing, and I saw the vision that they had, and and I I had them on my channel, and and whatnot. Yeah, a lot of those situations, that's what it's been. And then once you have a platform, then it's a lot easier, right?
Mhm.
So I've been able to interview, talk to most of my favorite authors, just because when you've got a YouTube channel with couple 100,000 subscribers, people will listen to you, and they'll,
Mhm.
that you've got something to offer. Also, one good tip is to, when people are ready to launch a book, then reach out to them, right?
Mhm.
That's when people are doing the most interviews, podcasts, everything. That's when, because people really have to do a lot of work to promote their books, so they're gonna
Mhm.
do that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it too is just, as long as you're producing good work. When I talk to a lot of big YouTubers and whatnot, they're like, "Oh yeah, I watch your videos," right? Even though I don't have a huge viewership on my videos, it's like I'm not necessarily creating content that's for the mass audience. It's
Mhm.
for the people who resonate with what I'm saying, and those people, they kind of already know who you are, right? Right.
Mhm.
When you reach a certain level. So
Right.
yeah, and the other big thing I'd say is that always look to see how you can create true value for someone else, not the kind of fake value. A lot of people reach out, or they'll reach out to me even, and they're like, "Hey, what can I do for you?" Or or they'll be like, I did this thing for you." It's like, no, just do the thing, right? So for
Mhm.
example, if I really wanted to get in touch with someone who was fairly famous and successful, and let's say I want to work for them, right?
Mhm.
And they're selling some kind of program. Well, I would go and I would start selling the program that they're selling, and get a bunch of sales for them, and then I would contact them and say, "Hey, you know, I sent you like 30 sales. Did you, let's talk. Like, I'd like to work
Yeah.
for you." Then they're going to be like, "Sure, yeah, you're hired," right on the spot, right?
Mhm.
So many people will email and be like, "Hey, I'd love to work for you. What can I do for you?" uh, I don't got time to answer that question. I don't know. Like, show me already what you can do for me, and then we'll
Mhm.
talk, right? And so it's the same thing as, like, even if you're just trying to make a connection with someone who's powerful, think outside the box. Think about who they know, right? You could probably get in touch with any celebrity by going to the celebrity, right? Social media, their Instagram.
Mhm.
Look at who are they following.
Mhm.
Find some little account that they're following, a couple of them. Go start, it'll take you time, but establish some relationships with them. DM them. Don't say anything about the celebrity. Just start a conversation, just chat with them, and
Mhm.
then eventually you'll get the introduction. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like like
Yeah.
you talk about, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast," and then maybe they'll volunteer the information, right? That
Mhm.
you got to think outside the box and think about ways that you can reach someone. That one time I needed a forward for my book, my software development book. And so one of the probably the most famous software developer at the time, Robert Martin, I asked him to write a forward, and I didn't get a response. I sent him a ham for Christmas. Like, I found his address. I was like, and then he was like, "Oh, what?" He wrote a forward, and he talked about the story about how persistent I was, and It was in my book. So
That's
you got to
awesome.
think about other ways to do things than, just the way that most people do it. So
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting. I like that. So this is like the last thing I always ask people, these 3 questions at the end of every podcast. They're supposed to be kind of like speed questions, I guess, but sometimes it's kind of hard to make a decision with a few of these answers. You'll see what I mean when I ask them. So first question is, what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten that you feel like has impacted you the most?
Damn. Best piece of advice that's impacted me the most. Gosh, I don't know. I really have to think about. I mean, I'll kind of just rail one off. I don't know if this is the best, but commit. 100% commit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wait, was that? Sorry,
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I didn't know. I don't know if we were playing like all right, let's do the uncomfortable game here. But
that's literally what I thought. I'm not even joking. I was like, is he doing one of those uncomfortable things with me right now? Okay, that's funny.
Like, I'm committed to it. No, that's it. Just commit. That's it. Just commit. Right? Commit to something holy. So.
Okay, awesome. And then, what is your favorite quote and why?
Oh, okay. The one, it's Tony Robbins. He said the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. So the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. And the reason why is because when I heard that, I was actually at Date with Destiny, one of his events, and it completely changed my life because I realized that I had built my whole life around certainty. I tried to create certainty, protection, right? A barrier, a fortress around myself financially, physically, emotionally, right? And because of that, I had choked the life out of my life, choked all the happiness and joy out of my life. And so I started embracing risk, embracing uncertainty, just saying whatever comes. I'm going to live my life and I'm going to accept the consequences for my actions. And that totally changed my life. So don't chase certainty. Like the more that you can become uncomfortable or become comfortable with uncertainty, the better off your life will be.
That kind of reminds me of this, like a thought I had actually when I was talking to one of my buddies. I was saying like, I wonder if at the end of like our lives, because I always think about the most successful people have probably failed the most in their life, and it's kind of an interesting thought where I was thinking, I wonder at the end of like I don't want to be at the end of my life and kind of be like, should I have like I wish I had failed more, because I feel like that's kind of relates to like the uncertainty, because maybe if I'm not where I want to be at when I'm 60 or 50 years old, whatever, am I going to be like, did I fail enough, or did I put myself in enough uncertain situations? So I don't know, it's just kind of interesting thought that made me think of that.
Yeah.
And then last question is, what book do you recommend that everyone should read?
Should I have so many of those? Dang, I'm trying to think which one I'll give you today. Okay, I got one for today. I mean, I have so many of them, but let's talk about this one. How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World by Harry Brown. I think that's the. Let me just make sure that's the exact title. How I Found Freedom. Yeah, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. Really, really good book. It's about thinking for yourself. Really, that's really what it's about. It's kind of this idea that we're all in a prison, so it doesn't matter. Like, just face that reality and then see what your freedom is within the prison.
It's cool. I like that. Yeah. So I guess this is technically the last question is, where can people find you, like if they want to connect with you in some way, or want to, like they resonate with your philosophies as well and want to check you out somewhere?
best thing to do is just go to bulldogmindset.com, and there's actually a quiz on there. There'll be a pop-up to ask you if you want to take the Bulldog quiz. Go ahead and take the quiz. Let's start off figuring out what your score is. There's just 10 questions, and then I'll send you emails with how to raise the score, my videos, all kinds of content and stuff to help you, with the kind of stuff we talked about today. So
awesome. And I'll put the link to that in the description for those of you who are interested in that. You guys can check that out. And yeah, John, thanks again for hopping on the podcast, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it was a pleasure to meet you and chat with you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it.